And welcome to this Zoom call about the Atacama Crossing. For those who don't know me, my name is Sam Fanshawe. Those who are registered and set to join already will know my name well from all the emails going out, and there'll be plenty more. We also have on this call Javier Ule, who is the course director for the Atacama Crossing. We have, I believe, Tony Brammer, who is a Four Deserts Club member who is also the CP captain and manages the volunteers at the race. I believe that we have all, or will soon be having, Jeremy, who is completed the Atacama Crossing 2023 and is also one of our trainers, so I will call on him to give you a few tips. And we have Mary Gaddams, who is the founder of Racing the Planet, on the call as well. I've got a lot to get through, so I am going to mute you all and ask you, where possible, to hold your questions until the end. However, there is a chat, and the people on the call, we're lucky enough to have plenty of people who know lots about the Atacama Crossing who can answer your questions, and you can also answer other people's if you know the answer. So let's get started. So let's start with the agenda. I think you know what I'm going to talk about from what I've sent out already, but here is a summary of what we're going to cover on today's call. I'm focusing it primarily, we're nearly 5 months out. I'm focusing it primarily on what you should know at this stage and not the details of some of the logistics, which I will hopefully either have another Zoom call, or you'll have the information sent to you either already or continuing in following emails. So starting very generally, hopefully you all know the answer to these ones, but here is a summary of what is the Atacama Crossing. So it is a 250 kilometer or 155 mile, 6-stage, 7-day self-supported ultramarathon in the most beautiful desert in South America and possibly the world. It's organized by Racing the Planet. It's part of the Four Deserts Ultramarathon series. And the other races in that series are the Gobi March in Mongolia, the Namib race in Namibia, and the Last Desert in Antarctica. 2025 will be the 18th edition of the race, and we've used a similar course for at least 16 of those editions. So we're all very familiar with where we're going and what we're doing. Summary of the format. So its stages, the first 4 stages are about 40 kilometers, 25 miles. Then stage 5, the long march, is about 80 kilometers, about 50 miles. The course is marked all the way along using pink flags. So you don't need any navigation, you just follow the flags. There is a checkpoint about every 10 kilometers or 6 miles along the course. And at the end of each stage, which is generally at the final checkpoint, we have a camp, and that's where we stay for the night and rest up and eat and stretch and chat and get to know everyone before you start the next stage all over again. It's self-supported, so you have to bring a comprehensive list of equipment. We do provide water along the route and at camp, and the logistics along the way. So let me start with some of the highlights. I just wanted to share with you some of my favorite photos. I could do an entire call just on the photos from the race. So this photo I love. It's actually salt that you can see behind there, not snow, but it looks a little bit like snow when you see it to start with. The slot canyons is definitely an amazing part of the course. You can see this is how wide it is. Some places it's narrower and some places it gets a little wider. That's on stage 2 of the course. Incredible views throughout the race, and here's just one of them as you're climbing up a dune, a not super soft dune, up to a high point on the long march. And we take you from there across, we'll take you to the moon. So we go through Moon Valley, and it really is very similar to how we imagine that the moon is. And actually NASA tests its Mars rovers in this area because they believe that the terrain is similar to what you would expect to find in the moon and Mars and other places in space. We then take you to Mars, and this is Valle del Marte, which is Valley of Mars, which is often known as Valle del Muerte because it sounds very similar, which would be Valley of Death. But it's, as you can see with the terrain around, you can understand why. And all the way along the course, you're under the watchful eye of volcano Licancabur, Volcan Licancabur, and you'll hear that name a lot because a lot of places and things in San Pedro are named after this volcano. And you can see it throughout the course. I think every stage you get to see it at least once, if not continually under it. We take you across the infamous salt flats, and I'll explain more about those later. On old Inca caravan routes, this one was actually then turned into a mining road, which they're no longer using anymore. And then there is that dune. So there's a number of dunes on this course, but on stage 2, there is a dune that is quite fantastic. That could be you running down that dune. And finally, if you can time it right, here, for example, is someone in Moon Valley with a full moon going through as the sun was setting. And again, you can see Volcan Licancabur in the background there. It is a very beautiful course, but it is quite challenging as well. The main challenges that to highlight to you now. So number one is the altitude. So the highest point of the course is at 3,200 meters, about 11,000 feet. And the lowest point is around 2,300 meters, about 7,500 feet. So you're always going to be at some form of altitude. It is below the level that people tend to get more serious altitude concerns, but you will definitely feel the lack of oxygen up there. And especially if you're coming from ground level or sea level, sorry, you will notice the difference. The other thing is, yes, it's hot during the day, but I think you're expecting that. In the heat of the day, it will get above 40 Celsius, above 100 Fahrenheit. But at night, it is very, very cold. And it does definitely get to 0 Celsius, 32 Fahrenheit at night, and sometimes actually can get into the negative. The positive thing about that is that it gives you a chance to cool down and recover. However, you really do want to think about your equipment to make sure that you stay warm at night and that helps you to sleep. It's very dry. So Atacama is one of the driest, or is the driest desert in the world and one of the driest places around. And so that environment is quite different. And the sun is very hot, which sounds like a silly thing to say, but also because you're at altitude, you feel the strength of the sun and the UV even more than you do just in a hot place. It's varied terrain, which is great, but some of that terrain is quite technical. More than 70% of the course is off-road, which means that you're not on flat, even easy surfaces to run. You are often on, saying here, more technical terrain. And then finally, you will definitely get your feet wet. There's not a lot of river crossings, but on stage 2, you're in a river for quite a long time, for about 5 kilometers, about 3 miles. And then there's various other places where you might get your feet wet, which always adds to a challenge. So I've summarized the weather there. One of the questions somebody asked was, what's the difference to the weather in March versus September? So we are holding the race in 2025 in March. Last edition of the race was held in September. As a note, we've held the race in March for 5 editions, so from 2008 until 2013. And we moved it to September primarily to fit in with our race calendar. And now we're moving it back to March for the same reason. The weather and the climate is very similar at both times of year. Effectively, September is spring, and March is autumn or fall. And as you may know, for those who live in areas where there are seasons, it's the shoulder season between winter and summer. And one way is going from, so in September, you're going from spring into summer. And in March, you're going from winter, you're in autumn, so sort of between winter and summer. So the temperatures and the climate and the weather is very similar. However, because the rainy season, and it sounds crazy to say that in the driest desert in the world, but there is rain around and in the mountains around, and the rainy season in this area is at the start of the year, so sort of January, February time. So when we go there, it's soon after that rainy season, and that can have effect on both how wet the ground is. If the water table is risen, it can make the ground a little softer and a little wetter. And in places where we go through water, it can make those levels a bit higher. It doesn't always, but it can. So that's really the big difference between the two times of year. So now I'm going to spend quite a lot of time going into the detail of the course. So some of this you can see on the website. And what I'm trying to do here is illustrate a little bit more each stage. So it's not just distance and elevation, but put some photos to that so you can actually see what that actually means. So here are the distances and the elevations for your reference. So stage 1 starts on the Sunday. And stage 5, which is the long march, is on Thursday, and for most people goes into Friday as well. And for those who finish just in one day, then you have a full rest day on the Friday before you do the final stage. As a note, as I go through this, these are the distances and the elevations that we work with and that the course is based on. However, there can always be minor changes in advance or right before the race, depending especially as we're going after rainy season, depending on how the course is when we actually get much closer to when you're going to be there. And the elevation chart again, just put it physically in front of you. You can see this on the website also, that the key point is the highest elevation point is 3,200 meters. The lowest point is 2,300. And you can see how most of it is below 2,000. Well, actually, most of it is really below 2,500, but that's still quite high. But we do start at the highest point on the course. So talking stage by stage, what I've done on the right-hand side is taken that elevation chart and squashed it so you can see what it looks like just for that stage. Couple of tips here. Be careful at the very start. We have a rocky start, and the last thing you want to do after so much preparation is take a tumble or cause a minor injury right at that start. You go through some canyons, you're on some rocky terrain, you have a gentle uphill up to CP3, and the final section is a long, slow uphill, and I'll show you some photos in a moment. So here, stage 1, once you get going, the first bit, you can see it's relatively flat, and there's the terrain you're looking at. Then on this section here, you start to go through a series of these canyons that you can see in the photo. Sometimes they're wider, sometimes they're much narrower, and there is actually a place where you'll have to go on your hands and knees underneath a rock. And then this long downhill section, so it is downhill, but it's a gentle downhill. So you would feel it if you were going in the opposite direction, but going this way, you may not feel it so much as downhill. But it's saying it's quite rocky there, and you can see the rocky terrain from the photo. Finally, the long uphill here. So you're going through a canyon. This is a wider part of the canyon, and you can see that there's an incline. Again, it's a slow incline, but you really will feel it. Partly it's stage 1. You're at quite high altitude. You're going uphill. You still have a heavy pack, and this is at the end of the day. It also can get very hot inside that last section, partly because many people will be there at the hottest point of the day, and partly because where you've got the walls on both sides, and so sometimes they're higher and sometimes they're not so high, but even so, they radiate heat from the sides as well as the sun coming from above. Moving on to stage 2. I'm going through it quite fast because I don't want you to spend too much time here, but you will have an opportunity to ask questions at the end of this presentation today, and also afterwards. I'm always available. So the slot canyons, you start with a gentle downhill into the canyon. You go through the river for about 5 kilometers, and you go up a hard-packed old Inca mining road. You go down a huge dune, and then you end up in the Valley of Mars /Death, as I explained a little bit before. You can see that final section, or final half almost, is effectively downhill. But don't be fooled by that, because people always find that last section very, very hard. It's the heat of the day, and it is less exciting, if you like, than what you've had so far. And it's on quite a sort of dusty road, so it's not super hard packed. So to show you the slot canyons to start with, apologies, I stretched the image so much because this is a short section. But to give you an idea, so the slot canyons are effectively downhill, and you can see here that water normally doesn't come above mid-thigh on your average height person. So I'd say, what, 5'5", what is that, about 1.5 meters high, 1.7 meters high. And the water sort of comes up to mid-thigh, but you can see the extra splash there. There's places where it's ankle deep, and there's places where it gets a bit wider, and you can actually avoid going in the water by going around the edge. May or may not be helpful, because you will definitely get your feet wet regardless. Sorry. After the slot canyons, you're on a flat road for a little bit before you start climbing up. So it's quite a long climb, and in places it's quite steep, but it is on a hard packed trail. Starting going up this old road, you meet a tunnel at the top. You take a sharp left, which is irrelevant, but that on the day I want you to remember that. And then you keep climbing up on this edge, if you like. The views from this photo here are just stunning across to your left. That goes on for a while. When you do eventually get to the top, you get to this dune, which I always say is a dune you will remember for the rest of your life. It's about 500 meters of running down. Mostly it's soft sand. You can see how soft it is from this photo here. It's a good example of why you probably do want to wear gaiters. Not just for this section, because it's a relatively short section. You'll be too focused on feeling amazing about running down that dune, and you'll have time at the bottom to empty your shoes. But there are areas where, not just on this dune, where the sand is as soft as this. I move on to stage 3 here. So this is where, in my opinion, stage 3 is the hardest. It doesn't look it from the elevation. Obviously, it's uphill at the end. But somehow the variety of the terrain, you're starting to get into some tough terrain, and it always seems to be very hot on this stage. It's your first, so you have your first introduction to the salt flats, which elevation wise may be flat, or elevation up and down may be flat, but actually they are not flat in terms of the terrain. Sometimes described as coral, which doesn't have the water there, or frozen broccoli, where you can sometimes go deep into it, sometimes you can stay on top. But it doesn't allow you to get into your stride. Then you have a last section, which is a mixture of soft sand, rocky sand, slate terrain. And it is a tough last section. And I think it's probably made harder by the fact that you can hear camp for about 5 kilometers before you actually reach camp. So showing you terrain, so it starts off nice and easy, and it is on this pretty hard-packed road. You can see the elevation gain, especially to start with, is minimal. You then get into the salt flats, and the first time that you'll really see this. Generally, it's not the hardest part of the salt flats, but your first introduction to it is never going to be easy. And then the last section, so ultimately it's uphill, but there's lots of up and downs. You can see the dunes aren't enormous, but there's quite a few of them. And then some of the ones you're going up, they are quite steep. And so you're 3 steps forward, 1 step back, steep, short, sharp dunes on very soft sand. You can see these people sensibly taking the chance to just have a rest, even halfway up, not even before the top, to help them keep going. These are also photos from stage 3. So you can see Lincoln Cabor volcano there in the background again. You go through some little valleys on the way, this man-made irrigation channel, and then here you can see more of how the dunes are undulating across. You can see in here as well, the pink flags are normally visible in these photos. Where they're not, they are still there, and those are the flags that you're following for the course. Bringing you on to stage 4, the infamous salt flats. So here you really get put into the middle of the salt flats. So you've had your introduction and now you get to really experience them. It starts off uphill on some sort of sandy, rocky terrain across a plateau. You go down into checkpoint 1. You go through a rocky forest, which it's not so challenging, and certainly there's no up and down in there. And then you have a long section across the salt flats on challenging terrain with no shade. So that section, it can be as much as 14 kilometers. And so it really, compared to most of our sections between checkpoints, which are about 10 kilometers, it feels like a long way. The other thing about it is that you can't see the end of where you're going. So if I show you some photos, it'll make a little more sense. So this is leaving from Camp 4, the start of stage 4, and you can see it is overall uphill, and you can see how sandy the terrain can be there. On this bit going down, depending on how the river is, you may get all the way down, but most likely you'll go along the top here, and it's slightly downhill, but you can see it's still quite sandy there. If you go down into the river, this is what it looks like. Again, you would get your feet wet if you do. And then into the actual infamous salt flat. So you can see the terrain is not inviting or easy to run on. It's not so hard for walking. You can see here there's some places where there's tracks that have been made by llamas or donkeys or previous Racing the Planet competitors coming through here. You can, however, also see that it's flat, so at least you don't have that to deal with as well. It's just that the terrain is quite challenging. You can see there is no shade, there's no option of shade nearby, and that blue sky indicates how hot it can get. And just to show you those salt flats in a bit more detail, so here is what I was talking about, where you can see for miles, but you can't see where your endpoint is. So it's quite disorientating to tell how far you've gone or how far you're going in there, which makes I feel like it makes it a bit more difficult because you're just endlessly on this terrain for quite a long section where you can't see the end of it. And this picture here just illustrates a bit more how challenging that terrain can be. Then I bring you on to stage 5, the long march. For many people, they'll tell you this is what the race is all about. I think it always feels a little bit, not a little bit, it makes you feel a little bit nervous going into something that's suddenly double the distance of what you've been doing so far, having already gone quite far. Here, the first section, I would say, is the most challenging. It's quite difficult terrain. It can be easier or harder terrain depending on the level of water, but it's back to the salt flats, but it's a bit more boggy. It's a bit more, there's a bit more grass there. Because there's more water there, there's more grass and vegetation to also deal with. So it's a bit more like going through, if you can imagine it, like a ploughed field in winter. So it's can be quite muddy, claggy, again, quite difficult to run. And it's quite a long first section, so it's a bit more than the average 10 kilometers that we normally have. This section here, you're basically going up a dune. The good thing is that it's not very, very soft sand, but it is sandy going up. And that's about halfway into the stage. You go across the plateau, you go back down, and then you're on a more runnable, a more easier terrain to go on, sort of dirt and dust tracks and roads, before we have a little challenging part at the end of it. So showing you this in pictures. So this is what I'm talking about, the start of the salt flats. And you can see the vegetation, and where there is more vegetation, it gets a little boggier. This is the dune that you're going up. So you can see it is quite steep, but I think you can see from there it's not completely soft sand. And when you get to the top and you go down the other side, that is your view running down into the checkpoint. And then after you've been along there, it is generally overall uphill, but it's relatively gentle uphill and on more runnable, more simple terrain. And then some of it at the very end is actually on a dirt road. So it's not tarmac, but it's a little easier. So that's my summary of the course. I'm not going to bring in Javier, and here's a picture of Javier, our course director here, just for the sake of saving time, but you can ask questions directly to him as well as me at the end of this call. So let me talk about the times for things. So first of all, the leaders are very fast. They will average in general over the years 10 to 11 kilometers or 6 to 7 miles per hour. So they'll finish a 40-kilometer stage in around 4 hours. However, it is possible to walk the entire course and still finish. There is a cut-off time at every single checkpoint, and it's based on approximately a 4-kilometer or 2.5 mile per hour walking speed. So those towards the back of the pack will be finishing a 40-kilometer stage in about 10 hours. So depending on what your goal is, that's what you want to be working towards. Some top tips for you, taking into account what you've just seen about the course. So my first tip for you is have a plan, put in place a plan and stick to it. Don't get overexcited when you very first start. And this is my second tip, start slowly. Is having been preparing for this for so long, you're suddenly in this amazing location. Everyone's excited to go. You've got lots of energy, and people get overexcited and already stop sticking to their plan. Also start slowly because you are at the highest altitude. Tread carefully, just be aware of the terrain because some of it is quite technical and some of it is prime for ankle twisting, which would be a real shame having done so much prep. Stay hydrated. So as part of having your plan, have a plan for how much you're going to drink, where and when. As a note to you, so everybody has to leave every checkpoint with a minimum of 1.5 litres of water. Even if you think you don't need it, you still have to leave with it. From our experience, that's what's needed. There are some sections, for example, the longer sections I've spoken about, where you will be required to take more. You are also able to ask for more if you feel like you need it. But don't not drink and then drink it all when you get to the checkpoint before you refill. Make sure you have a plan and make sure you're taking your electrolytes. Consistently eating on the course. When you're doing the stage races, as soon as you get behind on food or hydration, it's very difficult to catch up. Prepare as best as you can for the climate. So there's two things. There's one is in advance. We'll talk about that in a minute. The other thing is on the day. So the number one, not the number one thing that I very commonly see is it's cold in the morning, especially day one. And so people don't think about putting sunscreen on or think they'll do it later, but it heats up pretty fast. And so it's not unusual to get sunburn back of the ears or back of the knees. So be prepared, like make sure you're ready for what's coming, not just how it is right now. And then in the heat of the day, which is generally between 12 and 2 in the Atacama Desert, just remember when you feel like you're getting very hot, if you just go into the shade, whether it's at a checkpoint or if there's a few places where there's a little bit of shade along the course, just take a few minutes, take 5 minutes to rest, even if you're standing in the shade, just to cool down your body a little bit. And this one I think is key. Remember that you're here for fun. So when things get tough, and this is our course director's advice, when you're suffering, stop and look around. Remember you're there for fun. Remember where you are. Remember how lucky you are to have the opportunity to be there, and just take restock of things. Okay, training tips. So Jeremy, if you want to get ready to unmute yourself and just share a few things here, but let me just start before I bring you in, is to me, key is to set your realistic goal and plan your training based on that. And then your equipment, your food, and your plan for your schedule before and after each stage, and also during each stage, will vary depending on what your realistic goal is. And I can talk about that a bit more in a bit. The second thing is to have a training plan and try your best to stick to it based on what your goal is and what is realistic for you at the race. We have some generic training plans on our website if you just want to see how you're faring against them. There's a beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And we also recommend personal trainers who you can actually even just start with by contacting them to let them know your situation, what you want, and what they can give you if you're interested in going to that level. So at this point, Jeremy, if you are able to unmute yourself, I just wondered if you could share some specific tips, mainly based on these four bullet points here. And as a reminder, so Jeremy completed the Atacama Crossing in 2023. It was his first time doing a Racing the Planet ultramarathon, and he ended up finishing second. So he was obviously quite disciplined with his training, and he is also a personal trainer.
Hello, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so my first race was in Lapland, and being that it's my first longer ultra and stage race, and having a background in medicine, specifically emergency medicine, it kind of gave me two different ways to view the race. And so, as a competitor, I really didn't know how to initially train for something like this, and so I did follow the regimen that you guys had set up and gave myself a goal. And really, the goal was just to finish in a respectable time, having done some previous marathons and other races, and and then following the equipment list and all the food, hydration, etc. And it gave me an opportunity to not only compete and finish, but try to follow the plan and the rules that I had for myself. And so everybody's going to be a little bit different, and everybody will have to, come up with their own realistic plan. But as long as you stick to it, you're going to do great, and you'll enjoy it. And that's the most important thing about these races. If
Jeremy,
there's any,
that's awesome. Thank you so much for that. Um, I'm also going to ask Jeremy Inabnit.
Hello.
say that one.
Hello, Jeremy. So that was two Jeremys on the call. So that was Jeremy who completed Lapland, also his first race, and those are great tips for when you're going to get started. Then I'm also going to ask now Jeremy Inabnit, who was specifically can talk about this related to the Atacama Crossing and him as a personal trainer.
At this time, before the race, I mean, definitely you want to be running a lot, using all of your gear. So you should definitely have your hydration pack and all of that. Start testing your run food. I would also say, yeah, try to get all of the things and slowly, little by little, test everything. So you don't need to test everything all at once, but you need to start to use all of the gear that you're going to be using. And I would also say, like, test even the sleeping bag, the things that you think, you shouldn't have a problem with, or you assume that they're going to work the way you think they will. I would test everything. So get your night clothes on or whatever, and get in your sleeping bag with your pillow and on all of that and your pad, and make sure that that's all suitable for you. Also, you don't need to try to simulate half the race. It's very tempting to try to put a big block on your calendar, like, oh, I'm going to run 3 marathons in a row, and I'm only going to eat my stage race food and all of that. I would say you don't need to go to that level. You just try to have some big long runs on the weekend and test your training food, but you don't need to try to do all of that on low calories. Also, that's like super important. That's something that got in my mind when I first heard about stage races. Was I thought, like, okay, I'm just going to see what it's like to be mentally prepared and what it's like to run on low calories. But that's not really a good idea. You won't perform well, you won't get the most out of your training, and you won't recover well. I could say also, it's good to make a plan for the day, like to think about your schedule and what time you're going to wake up, eat breakfast, go to the bathroom and all of that, and give yourself a little bit more extra time on the first day, because you might find that the bathroom queue is longer, or things don't go quite as planned, or you're still pinning on your race bib or whatever. So allow yourself a little bit more time. You definitely don't want to be rushed, and you don't want to be even more excited at the starting line. Like Sam said, there's going to be a ton of energy. So when you get to the starting line, really just try to lock in on and make sure that you're running your own race, that you start off at the pace that you feel comfortable with, and manage your exertion.
So you actually wrote an article which I'll share with everyone after this call about Jeremy's experience preparing, what he learned, how he ran the race. So I'll share that with you. But specifically, Jeremy, were you able to train on sand, altitude, and in the heat? And how did you do it, given that I don't think you were?
No, I didn't get to train on sand. I mean, I was actually training in Finland, which is quite cold, even in the summer, and very flat, so I didn't get much altitude or elevation. I didn't even have much exposure to hills. So the very simple, like really boring answer is you just need to get as fit as you possibly can. That will help with the heat and the altitude. The second thing that you can do if you have access is implement a passive sauna protocol. So you can start about 6 weeks out, and I mean, the simple way, like without getting too specific in the details here, but is you go for an easy run and then you go sit in the sauna for 15 or 20 minutes afterward. And you start doing that about 6 weeks out, a few times a week. And you don't need to do that. You don't really need to be doing that right now because the heat adaptation comes and goes very quickly. But if you start about 6 weeks out, do that a bit all the way up until the time that you fly out to Atacama. That will help with the heat and with the altitude as well. Yeah, I think
That's perfect. As I said, Jeremy is one of our personal trainers that we recommend because he's been at the races, and so he does know. So if you want to connect with him, I will share the details. Also, we've got a page that has the Jeremy and other trainers on it, so you can find out a bit more about how they work. And you can ask him more questions at the end. My last question I have for you, Jeremy, just somebody specifically asked, is how do you tackle sand and sand dunes when you're actually there, whether you've had time to prepare or not?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's like with the sand dunes and even with the salt flats, it's like you get to it and you just have to quickly like try to learn and adapt really quickly. This actually think the salt flats are maybe a bigger concern. But it's you can't really you can't really train for them, but you need to have strong, durable legs and try to just really pay attention and adapt quickly and find what's working.
That's excellent. Thank you so much.
No problem.
And I'm just going to add to that in terms of acclimatizing to the altitude. So if you don't have a chance to acclimatize to altitude, so you live at sea level or not very high, and it's not so easy to get away, then if you can, and I know it's a luxury, but arrive a few days early in San Pedro, because San Pedro already is at some level of altitude. And that will help you immensely to acclimatize to everything. And you're only 5 to 10 minutes walk out of San Pedro, and you're in the desert. And it actually doesn't take that much longer to be even in the dunes. So you can actually at least know what you're going to be looking for. Obviously, in an ideal world, you get to train on sand, on dunes at some altitude. But listening to what Jeremy's saying and from his own experience, it's not always key to have done that. It's just to make sure that you're fit and ready for all sorts of different terrains. I wanted to, it's sort of a little out of place, but I wanted to mention here briefly about our team category. So we have 3 team categories, and this can be quite good motivation and a help for your training to know that you're part of a group. So we have the official team. First of all, let me say that if you are part of a team, you also get an individual ranking, and you're also in the race as an individual. So you have 2 opportunities for going for an award or a podium of sorts. The official team is minimum 2 people, and you have to be together the whole time on the course. It can be more than 2 people. Normally it's 3 people, but minimum 2. And your time that you have as a team, because you're together the whole time, is the time that goes into the team category to see who's at the top. We have a new team category called the group team, which is 3 to 5 people. You don't need to race together. You can all race individually. And then we take the average of all the people in that group team to go towards the group team category. And so the reason I mention it here is because being part of a team can be motivation both in training and preparation, and also during the race, knowing that it's not just you, you're doing it as part of a group. Okay, I'm moving away from the course into camp. So camp is obviously a key part of the races. So you can see here a photo. This is actually Camp 2 of the Atacama Crossing, and how it's laid out. So we provide tents. Shared tents are set up for you. If you want to bring a single tent, you can, and you need to put it up and take it down yourself, but we will transport it from camp to camp. Hot water is available at camps from 5:30 a.m. until race starts, so 7:30, 8 o'clock, and from about 2 p.m. until 9 p.m. in the evenings. Cold water is provided at camp and also at checkpoints in 20-litre containers. As mentioned previously, you have to leave every checkpoint with 1.5 litres of water. You should also start that stage from camp with 1.5 litres of water. And then at camp, your allocation is 3 litres of water for the time you're at camp. So that afternoon, that evening, that night, and in the morning, before you then fill up 1.5 litres to start the stage. Toilets are provided at camp. They're portaloos. You can actually just see them here, but they're very basic. They don't have toilet paper, but they are cleaned regularly, and it's an actual physical portaloo. When you're at camp, you must use the toilet. When you're on the course, you go al fresco on the course. We ask you to go off the course so that nobody else will walk in it. And if you are doing a number 2 or solid toileting, we just ask you to cover it over. You don't need to carry a spade or a shovel, but just with sand, dust, or rocks, and anything that did not come out of view or is disposable, so toilet paper or anything else goes into a toilet paper bag that we will give you at the start. You carry that to the next checkpoint, and they have bins there. There's no showers or washing at camp. The whole ethos of Racing the Planet is to take you back to basics. I recommend you bring wet wipes with you. There is an opportunity where you can just wash your feet in a very small amount of water at one station, one area in the camp, but you can't use it for washing your clothes or you can splash your face, you can brush your teeth with that water, but nothing more. There's a campfire every evening and in the morning, both for providing hot water and for keeping you warm, especially in the morning. There are bins for rubbish and trash at camp and also at the checkpoints. So everything you take with you to Camp 1, you either have to carry or wear for the entirety of the race, unless you're throwing it away. So packaging for food you can throw away. If there's non-mandatory items that you have, you can give them to us and we'll donate them to the local team, but you will not see them again. So anything you take to the course or take to Camp 1 is with you for the duration. There's no charging facilities at camp. Again, it's self-supported. So if you bring anything that needs charging, your watch, your camera, if you do bring a phone, I'll talk about that a little bit later, then you have to have a way either with extra batteries, external chargers, solar panels to be able to charge it. And we do have a cyber tent at camp, which I won't talk about a lot on this call, but it gives you a way to offline have some kind of communication back and forward. So you can send messages that we'll send to your friends and family at home, and you can read messages that are sent to you through our website. Here's a bit more on the tent options. So you can see the shared tents. They're officially 8-person tents. We put 6 people in them, or you can bring a single tent. And here's an example of somebody's single tent in the Atacama. Sorry, the tents, they do have a flooring and it's attached, so it's helpful for dust, but it doesn't give protection against the cold or the rocks. So just quickly, a day at the race. So the schedule you can expect at a day at the race. So at 7 o'clock, I will get on the speaker and just let you know it's 7 o'clock and you've got an hour till start time. At 7:30, we'll have a briefing. I'll tell you the cutoff times and anything different on the course than's in your course notes or anything specifically to look out for. Everyone starts together unless I tell you otherwise the night before. And then you literally just follow the flags through each of the checkpoints, which is about every 10 kilometers along, until you get to the final checkpoint, which is normally checkpoint 4, occasionally checkpoint 5, and on the long march, checkpoint 8, where that's at camp, and that's when your time stops. At each checkpoint, there is water to refill your bottles. Most checkpoints, at most checkpoints, there's a doctor, there's volunteers for support, and there's shade. You must leave every checkpoint with 1.5 liters of water. When you arrive at the final checkpoint, that's at camp, that's when your time stops. You then have the rest of that day, the evening, and the next morning to rest, relax, eat, stretch, relax, and whatever else you would like to do. And then you start again the next day. The long march is exactly the same format, only there's double the amount of checkpoints and double the amount of time allowed to complete them. The only things that are different is that there is one checkpoint that's just over halfway that we call the overnight checkpoint, and that's where you can get hot water. It's the only place other than camp that you can get hot water, and there is tents where you can have a proper rest. For those people towards the back of the field, so the cutoff times remain the same based on a similar kind of timing, but then at the overnight checkpoint, an extra 2 to 4 hours, and we'll tell you in advance of the race, is added so that even if you're walking at the cutoff time speed, you still have a chance at least for a few hours rest at that checkpoint. Okay, equipment. Most of the questions that came through were about equipment. It's a whole nother session really about equipment, but I wanted to cover the key points. So there's 35 mandatory equipment items. The equipment list, if you haven't seen it, it's a much longer document. It's about 9 pages long, but the list of equipment all fits on one page and it's here. The rest of the pages just give you more detail about the type of use, what you're looking for, and also some examples. The key items on there to prepare now or start looking at now and start selecting are your shoes, the backpack, your hydration system, and food. The bulk of the other items on there, so sleeping bag is a big item, emergency gear, and clothing. A note, and for those of you who have been registered for a while, you will have received one of my updates about equipment with the details of this. But about half of the items on this list are easy to get early, to the extent that they just are what they are. And however much research you do, you probably won't get anything too much different. So, for example, the red flashing light, the whistle, the mirror, the survival bivy bag, compass, sunscreen, lip screen, blister kit, compression bandage, safety pins, alcohol gel, toilet paper. That's all very simple. So at any time where you feel like you have time, it's a good opportunity to just go and purchase those items. So then that's half of the equipment items you don't have to worry about. You can bring more, you must bring these 35 items. You can bring more, you can't bring less. Generally try to minimize the optional items that you bring, but things that you might want to consider would be gaiters, sleeping bag, trekking poles, but only if you have used them before or if you think they're useful, in which case you should practice them before you get there. Simple things, toothpaste, and then maybe even camp shoes. So you have to wear shoes at camp, but when you've been in your trainers all day, you may want to have something like a very lightweight pair of flip-flops or similar. For those of you who've done a few races before, there is no drop bag anymore. That was related to one of our COVID protocols. So there is no drop bag unless you bring a single tent, and then just your single tent we will take for you from camp to camp. Some top tips on equipment. backpack weight, you should aim for 10 kilos or 22 pounds. The lightest backpack is normally around 6 kilos. In order to get it down that light, there's three things that will happen. One is you'll probably spend more money because to get the same item that's lighter is generally a bit more expensive. The other thing is you'll probably be hungry because you'll be limiting yourself to the mandatory calories and not more. And then you'll probably be cold because you'll be just again sticking to what you need to on the warm equipment. So if you can aim for 10 kilos, the heaviest is normally around 15 kilos, and that is such a bad idea. Aim for 8 to 10 and go for a maximum of 12. The sleeping bag must be rated to 0 Celsius. It's the same for all of our races, but in the Atacama Crossing, it's really key, and that's the comfort level. You must have the capacity to carry 2.5 litres of water. I'll come on to that more in a moment. There's certain items where you should consider a bit more. Sunscreen and alcohol gel are examples. It said the sun is very strong in Atacama, and you definitely want to use more rather than less. Little items like that we will have extra of, but if we give you extra, there is normally a time penalty. Things that for extra coverage from the sun to consider, so a hat that really does cover you, consider long sleeves, consider trousers or tights instead of shorts, more for protection from the sun than for warmth or anything else. Source the small items early, which I've mentioned already. Specifically on shoes. So I've put a number of different photos up here, none of them telling you what shoe to get, but hopefully encouraging you in the right direction. So comfort is key. Suitability to the terrain is ideal, but having a shoe that's perfect for the Atacama Desert, but always gives you blisters, is a bad idea, in which case go back to the fact of comfort. They should be relatively hard wearing because the terrain, especially the salt flats, is not very forgiving. Try to minimize the amount of mesh. So you can see up here, somebody had a Nike road running shoe. It worked, it was okay, but they have a lot of mesh. They got a lot of sand in. Obviously, having gaiters can help with that a little bit. Consider shoes that are 1 to 2 sizes bigger. Salomon work well, and I only say that because their shoes generally have quite tight mesh. They normally have a hard plate at the bottom rather than a soft foam sole. And they are quite hard wearing. But I will share this with you here. On our Facebook community page, where you can all post and ask questions or the like, I have posted some questions for the sake of other people before, and one of them on shoes was here, specifically about the Atacama Crossing. So 160 people responded to this poll. 30% used Hoka, 26% Salomon, and then others that we used were Brooks, New Balance, Innovate, and more. You can go to our community page, and I'll send it out to everyone in the follow-up to this call, so you can make sure that you can find this. If you go to the community page, you can actually search by topics, search shoes, and you'll get an idea, and then you can ask more questions there. And the other thing some people have asked about specifically is the backpack. So the size is key. 25 litres is ideal. Some people do it with 20 litres, but it's quite hard to fit everything into 20 litres, meet the requirements and not be hungry or cold. And there are 32 litre options available that can work if you want more space. But the problem with 32 is because you have a bit more space, people tend to just fill it and add more in, and the more you bring, the heavier it is. Comfort is the second most important thing. So weight, which relates to size, and then comfort. If I was to tell you, if you said to me, I just want to buy one backpack and I want one that works, the OMM is the one that I generally recommend as a go-to. It's a very standard one that seems to fit smaller people. It also fits taller people. It has the right kind of pockets. It's quite lightweight. It's quite affordable. it generally seems to be quite durable. Not saying it's everyone's preferred choice, but very few people have said that they can't use it. Whereas with other backpacks, somebody might love it, somebody might hate it, and everything in between. I did a similar thing with a poll on the same Facebook page, and you can see here, so 25% used OMM, 21% Raidlight, Ultimate Direction was popular, and then some other ones here, so Ultra Aspire, Instinct, and a specific one by Gossamer Gear. You can search a lot. The WAA one is very compact, very specific to desert racing, but you do have to be very organized with your packing to fit everything in and be able to find things. The Ultimate Direction works more like a vest pack, so it fits better. It comes in different, not volume sizes, but it comes in small, medium, or medium large, because you need that vest to fit you well. So it generally is more comfortable to wear, although the pockets don't always work for everyone. So the other two things to look at is accessibility of pockets, so you can easily access certain things throughout the day without having to take your pack off if you don't want to. Most people prefer not to have to. And then ways to carry your water, which I'll talk about next. So in terms of hydration, you have to be able to carry 2.5 liters of water. Most of the time, you will only be carrying and filling up with 1.5 liters of water, but you need to have the capacity for an extra liter for the longer sections, hotter sections, and if you feel like you need more. So the 1.5 liters should be easily accessible, both for filling up and for drinking from, and the 1 liter can be an extra that fits into your backpack somewhere. In general, people use the most common way of people carrying their 1.5 liters is in bottles strapped to the front of their pack. You can see this photo, she's chosen to have them lower down, but she has to take them out of the holders to drink them. And here he's got them further up. He's got long straws, so he can just reach across to his straw to drink it. Some backpacks have sleeves that you can put the water bottle in, some don't, and you can buy these water bottle holders that you can attach to your pack. And then for the 1 liter extra, something like a soft bottle, which is a little bit like a bladder, but doesn't have the tube, which you can roll up. It's very lightweight, doesn't take up much space, but then when you need it, it's very useful. And a final thing to say about the hydration is make it easy for you to drink and refill. So if you have to reach behind you to get your water to drink it, and you're on a roll, on a mission on the course, you're less likely to drink, and that could get you behind on your hydration. So make it easy for yourself. Okay, I'm nearly over time anyway, and I thought I might be, so I'm going to put this up. You can see this on the website, and I didn't want to go into too much detail about the logistics, but just so that you're aware. But I couldn't stop this call without just mentioning the host town of San Pedro de Atacama. That really is a gem of a host town. Here's a photo from its high street. No cars are allowed on there. Cars are allowed on some of the surrounding streets. And it has a great variety. It's a very small permanent residence town, but it's quite popular with visitors. And even so, it's still quite small in the centre and quite basic, with great places to eat, cafes, restaurants, bars, for before and after the race. So I've nearly finished my talking, but I want to cover some of the frequently asked questions that I get quite a lot from people. Are there streams or lakes or rivers near camps for washing or cleaning? The answer is no. There are some streams along the course and small rivers along the course. You can use them to wash, but that all is counted in your time. So none of them are close enough. Most of them are not close enough to go back to from camp. Do I get hot water on the course? I have covered it, but just to be clear, hot water for preparing hot meals is provided at camps. The only other place where there is hot water available for preparing meals is at the overnight checkpoint on the Long March. What are the cutoff times? So to reiterate, they're based on a 4 kilometer an hour or 2.5 mile per hour walking speed, and only on the long march. At the overnight, we add some hours there for you to have a chance to have a rest, but still be just walking the course. Backpack should weigh 8 to 10 kilos. Try not to get it over 12. Can I use water for washing? No. You could use a little bit for washing your feet, a little bit for splashing your face and brushing your teeth, but not for washing yourself or your clothes. Is there mobile reception on the course? Generally, no. You are, however, also not allowed to use your phone for non-emergencies on the race. It's self-supported, and we're trying to get you away from everyday luxuries. So no work emails, no social media when you're there. And actually, there is not very good reception anyway. You can carry a phone for emergency purposes, and we'll give you a couple of emergency numbers that will be on the course notes so that you can see them. But never assume that if you have a problem, you can just call us for help. You will have trackers on you, and you can push the emergency button there. But even so, on the course, always think about yourself and how you can get yourself out of it, because it can take us some time to get the message and get to you on that. So do I have to carry all my rubbish or trash? You have to carry it to a bin, and we have bins at the checkpoints and camps, and then you don't have to carry it after that. What is the withdrawal rate of the race? So generally, about 80 to 90% of people who start the race will finish. It depends a little on the climate and the group, but it means that there is a relatively high finish rate for doing the race. The most common reasons for not finishing, the first one generally is either not being physically or mentally prepared for the race, like not having done the research, not having done the training, or having something else going on at home. So you sort of, when you hit a tough spot, it's hard to carry on if you're not, if your heart and your mind isn't in it. Blisters are a very common reason for not finishing the race, as can be some other minor medical issues, so getting behind on your hydration and or having problems with the heat. Rarely have we had someone not finish because of the altitude, because there you are going downhill and you take it slowly. Sunrise and sunset in the Atacama at the time of year of the race. So sunrise is 7:30, sunset is 7:30. So you may be preparing in the morning before the stage, and after you finish, starting or ending in the dark, but you'll be on the course, except on the long march, most of the time in the daylight. And can my friend or family be part of the race? They can be part of the friends and family experience, which I have sent details out on, and I'll explain more if people want to know more. There are going to be some friends and family who are on the volunteer team. Currently, the volunteer team is full, but if anybody is interested, they can let me know. So, final checklist for those who are going for the Atacama Crossing in 2025. So read the essential race information document that I have sent to you or asked me to resend it. It's in the competitor area. Have in place or put in place a training plan. Start to plan and book your travel if you haven't already. I think a lot of people have, to get to Kalama. Check the equipment list early so there's no surprises, and start to select the key items. Watch or read the recommended information so you're as prepared as possible when you arrive. In time, the deadline's not till the end of January, but fill out the mandatory forms. And then finally, keep them to your training plan, and key is staying injury-free. Okay, that was a very fast run through of a lot of topics, which I hope you found helpful. But now let me open the floor up to you. If you've got any questions that you want to ask that you haven't already had answered in the chat, then please unmute yourself and you can ask myself, Mary, Javier, the course director, or other people on the call.
This is Vicki McDonald. Hello, can you hear me? So I'd like to know about shoes and the broccoli. Is it like walking? You had made the analogy of it's like walking on coral. So I'm a bit concerned that my shoes might get torn up as a result of that, meaning the soles might come off or get slashed or something. How much should I take that in consideration? Would regular trails, obviously, I think regular trails would do it, but just curious, what would happen if somebody's soles got torn up on the broccoli?
So if you're concerned, go for definitely a more solid shoe. Um, Something with a hard plate in the bottom of it and something that doesn't have easily tearing material on the side. That's the main reason I recommend something like Salomon, not just that, but they're more hard wearing. Whereas the Hokas that many people have worn and they've been fine, but they seem to have had the most problems on that terrain because they have such a soft foam sole.
Okay, thank you. One more quick question, and that is I think it was the end of the second day where you were crossing sort of a bog. I'm wondering if that is analogous to the end of the first day on the Mongolia March, where like these hummocks of vegetation, then you're st stepping down into soft mud, and then you're up on a hummock. Is there anyone who's done them both that can make that comparison?
Um, I would say it's not as the struggle I have is that because it will be after the rainy season, it might be different on the day.
Yes.
Most of the time we've been there, it has not been as bad as the day that you're talking about in Mongolia.
Okay, okay.
However, there have been times on this course where it has been for short sections of it and sort of can be up to ankle in not like bog, but just in sort of wet.
Yes, yes. So my problem, so to speak, on that part of the Mongolia March was the steadiness or lack of steadiness. So it's the only part of the entire race that I wish I had trekking poles, but so I'm just sort of thinking, would it be worth it to take trekking poles and then toss them? But I think you answered my question, and I'll just make do.
The one thing I would possibly suggest based on that, not because it's wet, but is on the frozen broccoli or the coral on the salt flats, where it is quite uneven. If you were thinking about wanting trekking poles on that section in the Gobi March, you might find them helpful in the Atacama. But
Okay,
if you
yeah.
got through the Gobi March without them, then and you don't normally use them, then I would probably suggest don't bring them. But
Okay,
perhaps think
yeah,
about it more on some more uneven terrain. Try some rocky terrain in your area and see how
yeah.
you feel.
Yeah, I think I'll just go with that. All right. Sorry for taking up so much of your time.
No, they're good questions. Does anybody else have any questions they would like to ask?
I have a question about patches, that you have to attach to your clothes, specifically to waterproof jackets, because when you sew into a waterproof jacket, that $100 or whatever you've spent on it is just gone to waste.
So a few things on this. One is we've had the experience when you do have to have patches on your jackets as well. Normally, when you sew into them, unless you take them off, it doesn't affect the waterproofness. You can also silk screen them on, um, or as an absolute worst case, you can not wear your patches, but there will be a time penalty for not having your patches on your waterproof jacket. The other alternative is it's not generally wet in the Atacama, so it doesn't have to be a top-notch waterproof jacket, but you still need to have it because it will help with the windproof, is to buy a cheaper option of jacket that you're not so worried about having the patches on.
Yeah, it's more about the weight then, though, is it? Second question about the patches. When do they get sent out still? Because I've done a couple before, but
So I would normally send them out, and timing wise would be December, but because it's Christmas coming up and I didn't want to get involved in the mail, I was going to send them in January. But if anybody wants me to send them earlier, we can send them out this month. So just send me an email and I can get them sent out to you.
brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, in that case, can I quickly ask Javier Ule, is there anything you would like to add to tell people? Javier is the course director, so he is the one who is doing the final prep for the course and will be marking the course. Is there anything you would like to share with people?
Hi, Sam, and hi, everyone. I think that you cover thoroughly everything. So, just for the sake of speaking, not much to add. One more thing about blisters and how to look after your own feet is moisturize them before the race. 1 week in advance to put cream, this kind of moisturizing cream to have them more resistant when the race takes place. And apart from that, I think you've covered everything. If anybody has a particular question, I'll be more than happy to reply, to answer it.
That's a very good point, Javier, and it's always one of your key tips. And actually, I have one final slide on here, which has some resource links to resources that I will send to people with the actual links. And we have a 3-episode YouTube series that talks about how to prevent blisters. And one of them, absolutely, Javier, is using lubrication of some sort to help prevent blisters on your feet. Excellent. Does anybody else have any questions they would like to ask us whilst you have us here? Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm sorry I went over. There's just so much to cover. But as you know that I am available on email, and I will hope to have another Zoom session closer to the time to talk about more specifics as you're starting to prepare to arrive in San Pedro. But for now, I'm going to sign off. I will look at all your questions in the chat, make sure they were all answered. And I will be sending more emails out to you all as you start to prepare, and look forward to meeting you and seeing you in San Pedro de Atacama. Okay, thank you all very much.
Okay, goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Yeah.